All right, so get this. Imagine World War II, but Spain decides to join up with Hitler.
Yeah.
Instead of paella and flamenco, we've got panzers rolling through the Pyrenees Mountains.
Oh, yeah.
It sounds crazy,
Oh, it's a pretty chilling thought to think about.
but it almost happened.
Yeah, it did. And that's what we're going to be diving into today, unpacking this text file you sent me, The Sharking Truth about Felix versus Goldeneye.
Catchy title.
Yeah. Yeah, it really grabs you. And it takes us through Operation Felix, which was Hitler's plan to capture Gibraltar, and the British countermove, which was known as Operation Goldeneye.
So Gibraltar, why does this tiny little rock matter so much?
Well, basically, whoever held Gibraltar controlled the Western Mediterranean.
Okay,
And so that was a choke point for Allied shipping, vital for supplies and troops and everything.
I see.
If Hitler had gotten a hold of it, the whole war could have gone very differently.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's huge. So Operation Felix, walk us through it.
Okay, so picture this. It's November 1940. Hitler has just issued Directive 18. And that was essentially Germany's playbook for getting Spain into the war on their side.
A playbook, huh? So it sounds like they had this whole thing planned out.
Oh, they did. They planned on sending 2 German Army Corps through the Pyrenees Mountains
Wow.
to capture Gibraltar. And we're talking tens of thousands of troops here.
Yeah.
And the idea was speed and just overwhelming force.
So the Pyrenees Mountains, those are no joke. Weren't those mountains also a big factor in the Spanish Civil War?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. A lot of really tough fighting happened there just a few years before World War II.
Right.
But Hitler was confident. He had General Ludwig Kubler's 1st Mountain Division, and they were specifically trained for that kind of terrain.
Oh, wow.
They had detailed maps from German intelligence, so every little nook and cranny of Gibraltar was accounted for.
So it was like a mountain blitzkrieg.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they weren't just thinking about Gibraltar either. The plan also involved deploying German forces to Spanish territories in North Africa.
Like where?
So you're talking Morocco, the Sahara, the Canary Islands?
Wow.
They wanted to just squeeze the Allies from all sides.
It sounds like they were not messing around. But hold on a sec. Spain had just come out of a brutal civil war.
Yeah.
Why would they even consider getting involved in another conflict?
Well, Spain was in a really tough spot at the time. They were desperate for resources. They were trying to rebuild their economy. And Hitler kind of dangled the carrot of territorial gains and economic aid in front of them, hoping to entice Franco.
So Spain had to kind of weigh the risks and the rewards there. On the one hand, siding with Hitler could bring in much-needed resources. It could potentially expand their territory.
Exactly.
On the other hand, jumping back into a war, especially on the side that was starting to look a little shaky, could backfire spectacularly.
Absolutely. And that's where a key figure comes in, frigate Captain Luis Carrero Blanco.
Okay.
He presented a report to Franco and the Spanish High Command, and this report changed everything.
All right, so let's talk about this Carrero Blanco guy. What was so special about his report?
Well, this report was like a cold shower for the Spanish leadership. Carrero Blanco was a very sharp strategist, and he saw right through Hitler's promises. He pointed out that Germany was actually shifting its focus away from Britain and towards closing off the Mediterranean.
So Gibraltar wasn't just about controlling shipping lanes. It was about a bigger strategic play for the entire Mediterranean.
Exactly. Carrero Blanco realized that Hitler was obsessed with controlling both Gibraltar and the Suez Canal, and he was even thinking of potentially delaying his invasion of Britain to achieve that.
Wow, that's a huge shift. And I'm guessing this did not sit well with the Spanish.
Not at all. Carrero Blanco also highlighted just how vulnerable Spain was.
Okay.
They relied heavily on trade with the Americas for things like fuel and grain, essentials for their economy.
Yeah.
And joining the Axis powers would mean risking those supply lines being cut off by the British Navy.
And relying on getting everything through the Pyrenees from Germany. I mean, we're talking about a country recovering from war here with very limited infrastructure. It just sounds like a logistical nightmare.
It was, and Carrero Blanco made sure that Franco and his team understood that.
So here's Spain, caught between a rock and a hard place. They're tempted by these promises from Hitler, but they're also acutely aware of the risks. So what do they do?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting. While Spain was wrestling with this dilemma, the British were busy cooking up their own plan.
Operation Goldeneye.
Oh, yes. This is where Ian Fleming, the guy who would later create James Bond, enters the picture. Talk about life imitating art.
It is incredible, isn't it? At the time, he was working for British Naval Intelligence, and he was tasked with keeping Spain neutral. And his plan was a really fascinating blend of espionage and sabotage, and perhaps, most importantly, some very strategic bribery.
Bribery. Okay, now we're talking. Tell me more about that.
Well, declassified documents reveal that the British funneled a mind-boggling amount of money to influential people in Franco's regime.
How much are we talking here?
Well over $200 million in today's money.
Wow, that's some serious cash. Who exactly were they targeting with these bribes?
Well, the documents specifically mention Nicholas Franco, who was the dictator's own brother.
As well as several high-ranking generals, and these were people who had the power to influence Franco's decision.
So it sounds like a classic case of follow the money, but how did they pull this off without anyone getting suspicious?
Well, they had a secret weapon, Juan March.
Who's that?
He was a Mallorcan banker with a real knack for discretion, and he acted as the middleman, channeling the funds and making sure that the recipients never knew where the money was really coming from.
Oh, that's pretty slick. But I can't even imagine the logistics of this operation. Moving that much money, keeping it all hush-hush, it must have been a nightmare.
It was a high-risk operation, for sure. The British ambassador in Spain had to go directly to Churchill and the Chancellor of the Exchequer to get the funds approved.
Wow.
They knew how crucial it was to keep Spain out of the war.
So while Hitler's trying to charm Franco into joining the Axis, the British are playing their own game behind the scenes. It's like this high-stakes poker match with the fate of the war hanging in the balance.
Yeah, it really highlights the importance of intelligence and covert operations during wartime. Sometimes a well-placed bribe can be just as effective as a battalion of soldiers.
So what happened next? Did Spain end up falling for Hitler's promises, or did the British bribes do the trick?
Franco sent his foreign minister, Ramon Serrano Suñer, to meet with Hitler in Germany. And according to Suñer, he told Hitler that Spain simply couldn't afford to join the war. He played up the dire economic situation. He claimed they were desperately short on supplies and resources.
So was Suñer being honest here, or was he just trying to politely decline Hitler's offer? I mean, we already talked about how Carrero Blanco's report had exposed all the risks of joining the Axis.
That's the million-dollar question. Some historians believe that Suñer was genuinely conveying Spain's predicament, while others suspect he was using the economic excuse as a smokescreen.
Makes sense. Spain was in a really tough spot.
Yeah.
They needed help rebuilding, but aligning with a power that was starting to look less and less invincible could have been suicidal.
Yeah. Exactly. Plus, Franco had his own agenda. He was eyeing territories in North Africa, and he was playing both sides to see who would offer him the best deal.
So Hitler's plan to get Spain into the war hit a major snag. But did he just accept this at face value? Did he simply walk away from Operation Felix?
Well, not exactly. There were other factors at play that likely contributed to his decision to ultimately abandon the operation.
Okay, I'm all ears. What else was going on that might have influenced Hitler's thinking?
Yeah, it really is mind-blowing how one single report could just derail this whole plan.
Yeah.
Like Carrero Blanco just threw a wrench right into Hitler's war machine.
He really did. It exposed the flaws in Germany's plan and forced Spain to confront the harsh realities of joining the war.
Right.
But, while Spain was busy doing some soul-searching, the British weren't just sitting on their hands.
Yeah.
They launched their own counter-operation, and it was straight out of a spy novel.
Oh, this is Operation Goldeneye, right?
Yeah.
This is where Ian Fleming comes in.
Yes.
The guy who would go on to create James Bond. Exactly. Talk about life imitating art.
Yeah.
Right?
It's kind of crazy.
So at the time, he was working for British naval intelligence.
Okay.
And he was tasked with keeping Spain neutral no matter what.
Yeah.
And his plan was this really fascinating blend of espionage and sabotage, and maybe most importantly, some very strategic bribery.
Bribery. Okay, now we're talking. Tell me more about that.
Well, declassified documents have revealed that the British funneled an enormous amount of money to influential people in Franco's regime.
How much are we talking?
Over $200 million in today's money.
Wow, that's some serious cash. Who
Right.
exactly were they targeting with these bribes?
The documents specifically mention Nicholas Franco, who was Franco's brother,
Oh, wow. Okay.
and also several high-ranking generals, people who had the power to influence Franco's decisions.
So it sounds like a classic case of follow the money. How on earth did they pull this off without anyone getting suspicious?
They had a secret weapon, a guy named Juan March.
Okay.
He was a Mallorcan banker with a real knack for discretion. And he acted as the middleman, channeling these funds and making sure the recipients never knew where the money was really coming from.
Oh, that's so smart. But I mean, I can't even imagine the logistics of an operation like that. Moving all that money, keeping it all quiet. It must have been a total nightmare.
It was a high-risk operation, for sure. Yeah. The British ambassador to Spain had to go directly to Churchill and the Chancellor of the Exchequer to get the funds approved.
Wow.
They knew how crucial it was to keep Spain out of the war.
So while Hitler is trying to charm Franco into joining the Axis, the British are playing their own game in the background. It's like this crazy high-stakes poker match
Yeah.
with the fate of the world hanging in the balance.
It really shows you the importance of intelligence and covert operations during wartime.
Yeah.
Sometimes a well-placed bribe can be just as effective as an army.
So what happened next? I mean, did Spain end up falling for Hitler's promises, or did the British bribes actually work?
Well, Franco sent his foreign minister, a guy named Ramon Serrano Suñer, to meet with Hitler in Germany. And according to Suñer's own account, he told Hitler that Spain simply couldn't afford to join the war.
Hmm.
He emphasized their dire economic situation, claimed they were desperately short on supplies and resources.
So was he being honest, or was he just trying to let Hitler down easy? I mean, we already talked about how that Carrero-Blanco report exposed how risky it would be for them to join the Axis powers.
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Some historians believe that Suñer was genuinely conveying Spain's predicament, and others suspect he was using the economic excuse as a smokescreen.
Right, because Spain was in a very difficult position. I mean, they needed help to rebuild,
For sure.
but siding with a power that was starting to look less and less invincible could have been a really, really bad move.
Exactly. Plus, Franco had his own agenda, too.
Okay.
He wanted to expand Spain's territory in North Africa, and he was playing both sides to see who would give him the best deal.
Wow, so Hitler's plan to get Spain into the war just hit a major roadblock. Did he just take this at face value? Did he just walk away from Operation Felix?
Not exactly.
Yeah.
There were other factors at play as well that probably contributed to his decision to abandon the operation.
Okay, I'm all ears. What else was going on that could have changed Hitler's mind? So Hitler's plan to get Spain into the war was facing some pretty big obstacles.
Yeah.
What were some of the things that made him ultimately decide to just abandon Operation Felix?
Well, for starters, you have to remember that report by Carrero Blanco.
Yeah, the one that basically showed how unprepared Spain was for another war.
Right. The one that highlighted Spain's reliance on trade with the Americas and the huge logistical problems of getting supplies through the Pyrenees Mountains.
Yeah.
I mean, that report probably played a big role in Hitler's decision.
Okay.
He realized that instead of being an asset, Spain could actually become a burden for Germany.
Yeah, it's like they were trying to invite a guest to a party, but that guest shows up with no food, no drinks, and a bunch of extra people.
Exactly. And then you've also got the issue of those British bribes. While it's impossible to know for sure how much they influenced Franco's inner circle, it's definitely possible they helped sway things toward neutrality.
It makes you wonder what was going through the minds of those generals back then.
Yeah.
Patriotism, ideology, self-preservation, maybe even just plain old greed.
It was a very complicated situation, no doubt. And on top of all that, you can't forget about Franco himself.
Right.
I mean, he was a very shrewd politician, and he was playing a very dangerous game.
Yeah.
He saw a chance to get concessions from both sides and keep Spain out of the fighting.
So he was basically using Operation Felix as leverage.
Yeah, it seems that way.
Yeah.
He really wanted to expand Spain's territory in North Africa, and he was willing to play both sides against each other to make that happen.
Wow. Talk about playing with fire. And this is all happening while the rest of Europe is caught up in this huge conflict.
Yeah.
It's amazing to see the power dynamics that were at play during World War II.
It definitely is. And it's also a good reminder that history is rarely black and white. You know, there are always shades of gray hidden agendas, unintended consequences.
And in this case, those shades of gray kept Spain out of World War II. But it makes you wonder, what if things had gone differently? What if Spain had joined the Axis?
Yeah.
How do you think the war would have played out?
That's a question historians have been debating for decades.
Yeah.
Some people say that Spain joining the Axis would have been a total game changer,
Okay.
giving Hitler control of the Mediterranean and maybe even crippling Allied supply lines.
Yeah, that would have had a massive impact on the war in North Africa.
Yeah.
Maybe even delayed the D-Day landings. The effects are pretty mind-boggling.
Exactly. But other historians believe that Spain's military was just too weak to have made a real difference.
Oh, okay.
And they think that their involvement might have actually stretched German resources even thinner.
It's one of those big historical what-ifs. We can speculate all day long, but we'll never know for sure.
You're right about that. But one thing we do know is that Spain's neutrality had a major impact on the war, even if it was unintentional.
It's interesting how sometimes the most important decisions are the ones that people don't make.
Yeah.
Just by choosing not to join the fight, Spain really shaped how World War II played out.
That's the beauty of history. It's full of surprises and unexpected twists and turns.
Well, I don't know about you, but this deep dive has definitely made me want to learn more about Operation Felix,
Yeah, me too.
And Operation Goldeneye and the complex role that Spain played during those crazy years.
I agree. It's a story that deserves to be explored more.
Yeah.
And for those of you listening out there, I encourage you to dig a little deeper into this fascinating part of history. You never know what you might find.